The storm lantern's amber glow fought a losing battle against the encroaching shadows of the shack, casting Andrew's silhouette in jagged flickers across the timber walls. Outside, the North Pacific gale screamed, threatening to peel the cedar shingles right off the roof. Andrew didn't flinch. He had pinned the mentor's journal open on the workbench, anchoring the stubborn, salt-stiffened pages with two heavy lead diving weights. Under this light, the faded ink and hand-drawn bathymetry charts no longer looked like sketches. They looked like an impossible equation where the only solution was survival. Andrew rubbed his face, his palms rough like 80 grit sandpaper against his stubble. The salt from the day's spray stung his skin, a constant reminder of the stakes. He stared at the drawings. The code wasn't written in words or even standard GPS coordinates. It was written in frequencies. His mentor had spent a lifetime recording the song of the tectonic plates shifting beneath the abyss. He had realized that the lost swell wasn't just born from the wind. It was a rhythmic resonance, a deep tissue vibration of the earth itself. For hours, Andrew layered modern satellite imagery over the 1970s hand-drawn maps. The contrast was jarring. Where the satellites saw only a flat, uniform expanse of blue, the journal described a jagged, abyssal trench, a narrow underwater canyon capable of compressing an entire ocean's energy into a single, vertical wall of water. His fingers, stiff from the damp cold, traced the isobar lines of atmospheric pressure. He was hunting for the tipping point, the exact alignment between a massive Aleutian low-pressure system and that invisible scar on the seafloor. The heavy silence inside the shack was suddenly shattered by the piercing cry of a seagull, swept inland by a violent gust. Andrew froze. His eyes locked onto a tiny, hurried scrawl in the corner of a yellowed page. The sound precedes the sight. Listen for the 14 hertz pulse. It was the trigger. He reached beneath the bench and pulled out an old, military-grade oscilloscope, a relic he had kept tuned for years. He toggled the switches, connecting it to the hydrophone he had submerged in the bay earlier that evening. On the small, circular green screen, a flat line stared back at him. Andrew held his breath, his heart hammering against his ribs. Then, agonizingly slow, the line began to ripple. A rhythmic, undulating wave. A frequency too low for the human ear to hear, but powerful enough to vibrate through the marrow of his bones. The code had activated. The storm in the Aleutians was sending its first herald. There was no joy in the discovery, only a crushing sense of gravity. The journal indicated that once this pulse was detected, the window was narrow, barely 48 hours before the swell reached its terminal peak at the Ghost Reef. Andrew plunged back into the work, his compass needle scratching against the nautical charts. He plotted vectors, his calculations bleeding into old coffee stains and sea salt crust. He had to calculate the swell's velocity, the angle of approach, and the exact X, where the deep-water energy would collide with the reef. As the first light of dawn began to paint the grime-streaked windows in a cold, metallic gray, Andrew finally set his compass down. His back ached, a dull throb that felt as old as the boards beneath his feet. The coordinates were no longer an abstract theory. They were a destination. He stood up and looked out at the churning, white-capped graveyard of the bay. He knew the hardest part wasn't deciphering the math. It was finding the courage to follow the path he had just carved into the paper.